Good morning, my name is Vitor Emeria. I'm a second-year resident, and I will be presenting today's Journal Club under the guidance and orientation of Dr. Caio Santos, staff from the Department of Glaucoma. This is a photo of me. The title of today's journal is Predicting Glaucoma Development with Longitudinal Deep Learning Predictions from Fundus Photographies, and it was published in May 2021 in the American Journal of Ophthalmology. The purpose of the article was to assess whether longitudinal changes in a deep learning algorithmic predictions of retinal nerve fiber layer RNFL thickness based on fundus photographs can predict future development of glaucomatous visual field defects. Its design was a retrospective cohorted study. The article starts by saying that glaucoma is the leading cause of irreversible blindness in the world. This disease is marked by the degeneration of retinal ganglion cells that leads to changes in the optic disc nerve head appearances, along with an insidious progression of the characteristic visual field defects. However, as glaucoma tends to initially be asymptomatic until late stage, patients only present for care in advanced cases. Thus, early diagnosis and treatments are paramount to preserve quality of life. Previous studies found that retinal nerve fiber layer RNFL thickness measurements from OCT can be used to detect glaucomatous changes prior in the development of irreversible visual field defects. However, despite this increased availability, OCT devices are still rare in many clinical settings. OCT, for screening purposes or for monitoring glaucoma suspects outside of specialized center eyes, is difficult, owing to the prohibitive costs and the requirement of well-trained technicians. One potential way to address this problem has been shown in deep learning research using fundus photographs, which are cheap and easy to acquire. Previous studies have shown that feasibility of training a deep learning algorithm to obtain predictions of RNFL thickness measurements from simple fundus photographs. The model used OCT acquire RNFL thickness measurement as the ground truth in an approach named machine-to-machine or M2M. The M2M predictions from fundus photographs showed excellent correlation with actual OCT measurements. Although the M2M model predictions show good correspondence to OCT measurements, their value in predicting glaucoma development in suspected eyes has yet not been shown. Thus, in the present study, they applied the M2M model to fundus photographs of glaucoma suspected eyes, follow over time until the development of their first evidence of glaucomatous visual field defects. In doing so, they investigated whether M2M predicted RNFL thicknesses can be used to detect glaucomatous damage before the appearance of visual field defects. This study included a retrospective cohort extracted from the Duke Glaucoma Registers. The database included data regarding patients' demographic, as well as patient diagnosis, ocular and medical history, best corrected visual acuity, slit lamp biomicroscopy, IOP measurement, central cornea thicknesses, gonioscopy, and data from standard automated perimetry, SAP, and stereoscopic optic disc photographs. Glaucoma suspected eyes were those with a history of elevated IOP and suspicious appearance of the optic disc on slit lamp fundus examination. The exclusion criteria were history of ocular or systemic diseases that could affect the visual field or optic nerve. All eyes required to have a normal SAP test within 3 months or their first fundus photograph. Visual fields were excluded for the following reasons: fixation loss or over more than 33%, false positive errors, and more than 15% of glaucoma M-field tests, classification of abnormal high sensitivity. The date of the first fundus photograph marked the study point for each eye. From that point on, the SAP results for each visit were analyzed to assess the development of abnormal visual fields. The criteria for an abnormal visual field was defined as PSD of minor of 0.05 or GHT result outside normal limits. Eyes that had at least 2 consecutive abnormal visual field defects during follow-up were classified as converters, which indicate glaucomatous conversions. The other eyes were classified as non-converters. For the converters, they analyzed only fundus photographs taken before the date of confirmation of conversion. As for the non-converters, all available photographs were used. The study endpoint was the date of the second abnormal visual field for the converters and the last available visual field in follow-up for non-converters. About the machine-to-machine or M2M model, it is a deep learning model that was used for this study. It's basically a convolutional neural network trained to predict glaucoma. It is basically a convolutional neural network trained to predict global RNFL thickness measurements using fundus photographs. The model was trained using a data set of 26,509 pairs of fundus photographs and OCT scans of 2,500 eyes of 1,300 patients. The M2M RNFL's predictions had a mean absolute error of only 7.4 micrometers and correlation of 0.8 with observed RNFL thicknesses from per OCT. After being trained and validated, the M2M model was used to obtain RNFL thicknesses predictions for each fundus photographed from this study cohort. For the statistical analysis, they use a joint longitudinal survival model to investigate the relationship between baseline and longitudinal predictions of RNFL thicknesses and the risk of developing visual field loss in glaucoma suspects. This survival submodel was used to quantify the rate of association between longitudinal change in predicted RNFL thicknesses and the risk of the event, that is, developing visual field loss. As a result, the study included 1,072 eyes of 827 glaucoma suspect patients. Fundus photographs acquired over a 30-year period were used from 1986 to 2017. The mean number of 4.2 fundus photographs per eye were available during follow-up. The mean number of visual field tested per eye during follow-up was approximately 9.5. A total of 18% eyes converted to glaucoma during follow-up. The mean time of follow-up was approximately 4 years. As the mean baseline predicted RNFL thickness from fundus photography was 88.7 micrometers for converters and 92 micrometers for non-converters. Also, the mean rate of change was minus 1.02 micrometer per eye of RNFL thickness measurements for converters and minus 0.67 micrometer per eye of RNFL thickness measurement for non-converters. Here, this image illustrates that the mean rate of change was significantly faster for converters than non-converters, as we can see. After the statistical analysis, they found that after adjusting for baseline confounding factors, each 10 micrometer thinner predicted baseline RNFL thicknesses was associated with a 56% increase in hazard, and each 1 micrometer per eye faster decrease in predicted RNFL thicknesses was associated with a 99% increase in hazard. This figure shows representative examples of eyes in the study illustrating fundus photographs and M2M predictions of RNFL thicknesses, as well as visual field results at different time points during follow-up. Figure A shows an eye that had significant decline in predicted RNFL thicknesses over time from 83 to 69 micrometer. It can be seen that this translates into a very high risk of conversion. Figure 2 shows an eye with stable M2M predictions of RNFL thicknesses over time and who in fact did not develop visual field loss. Using a joint longitudinal survival model also allowed them to model how the risk of conversion to glaucoma would change for a particular eye as more fundus photographs were acquired over time. In this approach, the addition of new data modifies the probability of conversions. In this image, we have two different eyes in the top and the bottom row. It is a graphic representation of the survival probability for each eye. And as we can see, the eye depicted in the top row had a much faster rate of decline during follow-up, and its probability of survival, that is, non-converting to glaucoma, diminished correspondingly as more data were acquired over time. In the study, deep learning predictions of RNFL thicknesses based only on fundus photographs were able to predict the future development of visual field defects in eyes of glaucoma suspects. Eyes that had lower M2M predictions of RNFL thicknesses at baseline and faster decline in thicknesses over time were significantly more likely to convert to glaucoma. While the baseline models alone were predictive of future glaucomatous conversion, incorporating a longitudinal change significantly strengthened this predictive ability. Even after controlling for potential confounding factors or variables, baseline and longitudinal changes in M2M predictions of RNFL thicknesses were still predictive of future conversion to glaucoma. These results provide an evidence for the potential of deep learning approach applied to fundus photographs to be used for longitudinal monitoring of eyes suspected of glaucoma. As previous study shows that a joint longitudinal survival model of actual RNFL thicknesses measured by OCT has a predictive of future glaucomatous conversions on SAP. That study found that each 10 micrometers thinner global RNFL thicknesses at baseline was associated with a hazard ratio of 1.59, and each micrometer per eye faster decrease in RNFL thicknesses during follow-up was associated with a hazard ratio of 1.97. In this present study, which use M2M predictions of RNFL thicknesses from fundus photographs, had comparable values. This is a striking result given that their predictive RNFL thickness measurements were obtained solely from fundus photographs using a previously trained deep learning model. In a more recent study, Jamal and colleagues also showed that M2M predictions generally outperform human grants in detecting glaucoma on fundus photographs. The use of deep learning based on fundus photographs for monitoring eyes suspected of glaucoma is appealing, given its low-cost potential for widespread availability and objectivity. While effective at diagnosis and staging glaucoma, OCT are expensive and require technical expertise in acquiring and interpreting images. As such, their availability is limited beyond specialized eye centers. Fundus photographs are relatively easy to acquire, cheap, and much more accessible. Development of portable fundus cameras have expanded the role of fundus photographs in ophthalmological screening through telemedicine. And more recently, fundus photography has been adapted even to simple smartphone cameras. Those innovations could further enable imaging in undersea regions, which are disproportionately higher which has disproportionately higher rates of glaucoma. Thus, this method based on fundus photographs has potential for widespread availability. Other deep learning models have been trained to replicate subjectivity human grants on fundus photographs. Such an approach suffers from inaccuracies of the subjective gradients used as ground truth for their training. Many previous studies have shown that subjective gradients have poor inter-rater reliability and result in under or overestimation of the amount of glaucomatous damage. In addition, because human gradients are generally qualitative, this would make it difficult to use such deep learning models to track change over time. The application of their M2M deep learning algorithm on fundus photographs overcomes each of those issues, since it was trained using RNFL thickness measurements from OCT as the reference standard. The M2M deep learning predictions based on fundus photograph is fully objective and quantitative. And once trained, the deep learning model can be applied to new photographs in real time, not requiring interpretation by an ophthalmologist. An attractive feature of the model shown in this study is the ability of obtain update predictions of risk of glaucoma as more data are acquired over time for an individual patient, as we can see in the image. Other studies, in fact, have shown that baseline measurements are insufficient to provide enough predictive ability to estimate the risk of future development of glaucoma in suspected eyes. Thus, the ability to continuously update predictions and use longitudinal changes in the acquired data makes their model a useful clinical tool for monitoring glaucomatous change and improve risk prediction. As the limitation, this study highlights that it was used a population of glaucoma suspected patients presenting to a tertiary care center. As such, the result of this study may not be completely generalizable to use in other settings, namely in the broader population at larger as a screening tool or in a non-academic community setting. In conclusion, this study demonstrated that the deep learning predictions of RNFL thickness measurements based on fundus photographs can be used to predict risk of future glaucomatous conversions. This method can be potentially used to develop a cheap and accessible glaucoma screening method, as well as to monitor risk of glaucomatous conversion in eyes with suspicious of glaucoma. Thank you.